Hi, everyone. Welcome back to What They Don't Say. I'm Shannon.
And I am Lauren. I have a fun little story.
Do tell.
Okay, so I had therapy this morning, and at the
Yay.
end,
Good story.
yay, and that's my story. At the end of therapy, my therapist was like, "Oh my gosh, I have a little story to tell you." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And I feel like therapists never really tell stories, right? Like it's always kind of just you're the storyteller in this
Right.
dynamic. She was talking about how she has a new client who was very recently sexually assaulted. She was talking about how before she, meets with a new client, she kind of preps for it, obviously, and kind of just like compiles resources that are tailored towards, whatever it is the client is going through. And she wanted to find some podcasts for this client. And she knows that we have our podcast. Like I've talked a little bit about it. I haven't like told her the name or anything like that. We've kind of just like talked about it in passing. But she was saying how she was like just driving and like looking through podcasts and she just like looked up like sexual assault podcasts. And she said she had like listened to a couple and was like, okay, yeah, no, not really. Like these aren't what I'm looking for. And then clicks on one of our episodes and has no idea that it's me.
Stop. Oh my
And
gosh.
she's like listening to our episode and like halfway through she's like, wow, this voice sounds so familiar, like I feel like I know this person. And she like, because we don't have our full names like in the episodes, you really
Yeah.
don't know who we are if you
Unless
like
you're on
just
like the bio.
right. And she
Yeah.
wasn't, she like just had clicked an episode. And so she said she like zoomed in on our cover art and saw that it was me. And she just thought it was super cool. And she is going to start sharing our podcast as a resource to her clients who are
Oh,
dealing with like anything that has to do with sexual assault, which is exactly,
oh my
what we
gosh.
want. But I thought that was really funny and I felt kind of flattered. I was like,
Hey,
"Oh."
that's awesome. I hope she
Yeah.
liked it. I hope she wasn't listening thinking, what is this?
I honestly like didn't even ask because I was kind of scared.
So last week, I've been working on making new friends. I really want to try and expand my circle. I love the people that I'm friends with, but just as I'm getting older, I've been craving sort of a bigger network of people that I'm closer with. And I made this new friend recently, and her and I haven't really gotten to, like get deep. We've gone out together and things like that, but we haven't had any deep conversations. And last week was the first time where we started talking about trauma. And that's when
Wait. Drama or trauma?
oh, trauma with
Thank
a
you.
T.
Okay.
So
Okay.
you know what? That is funny though, because it very much could be drama.
Both. Yep.
So we started talking about trauma, and she had known about the podcast, but she wasn't fully familiar with what it was about. And she just basically flat out said, I am a little bit confused. Like, can you explain to me why sexual assault is so bad? Like, I don't understand it. And like, why does it hurt so
Really?
much? And it wasn't in a patronizing way. It was really just in
Right.
a way of she hadn't experienced it, or maybe she has and she didn't know it. What parallels this is that on the day I was assaulted, I can't remember if I've talked about this on here, but on the day I was assaulted, before I was assaulted, I was talking about to a friend about how I didn't understand how sexual assault was so bad. And
Yeah.
so basically, between last week and then obviously that experience I had years ago, I realized that we hadn't talked at all about like breaking down why does sexual assault hurt? Why is it so traumatic? And kind of like what it does to your thinking and just why is it bad?
It's kind of such a simple question in itself, but it's also so complex and so complicated. And I think that when we talk about sexual assault, I think you and I were kind of in the same boat when it comes to just understanding what it is and why it's so bad. And I think a lot of people are. And I know for me and for a lot of people, you just like for me after it happened to me, I was like, I don't know what the fuck just happened. Like I don't know. All I know is that was wrong. I don't feel good, but I can't explain why. Like I couldn't put words to it. I couldn't attach like any meaning or definitions to what
Right.
I had been through. And I think that lack of understanding and then kind of just the lack of understanding why it is so bad go hand in hand so much and is kind of just once again a result of a lack of education on these
Right.
topics. I think that It's not something we talk about growing up. It's not something we typically talk about in sex education and things like that. We really don't hear about what is sexual assault until you get to college and you go through like your first little training thing that you have to go
Right.
through. But other than that, you never have these conversations. So how are you supposed to know? And like with other physical traumas, like getting stabbed or, something like
Breaking a
that.
bone or getting hit
Yes,
in a
like
car accident.
you can understand why it is so bad because you understand what a stabbing is.
Hmm.
But it's hard to understand why something is so bad if you don't understand what it is.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. And it also makes me think about the line between sexual assault and sex is a very thin line in the sense of something can be really good and then go to really bad. And so, like, the opposite of sexual, like, from the outside looking in, someone could see a sexual assault happen and not know that it's a sexual assault, right? And so it's because it's this crime that is intertwined with something that is supposed to be really good. And I think that makes it confusing to a whole other level. And on the ground floor, it basically sexual assault takes the most intimate thing and it makes it torture.
Hmm. And it takes away this autonomy you have over your body and the fact that you should have that decision over whether you have sex or not. And when someone takes that decision from you, it's a horrifying feeling. And then you feel like your body isn't your own. And I know that a lot of people experience like after it happens, you literally just like you're in the shower and you want to like rub your skin off.
Hmm.
You feel like your skin is crawling. You feel like you're like kind of like trapped in this
And this body that's
sensation.
no longer yours.
Yes.
Yeah, I
Because
had,
like someone has like taken it from you.
right. And I looked up just the definition of autonomy. I know what autonomy is, but just for the sake of this. And this definition said that autonomy is the freedom from external control or influence. You're taught throughout most of your life that you are making a decision. Like you get to choose what clothes you want to put on. You get to choose this, and this is your body. And then all of a sudden, that decision is taken away from you. You no longer get a say in what is coming into your body. You no longer get to say who you want to sleep with or who you want to be with, naked in a very intimate experience. That decision is put into somebody else's hands and you never asked for it. And it's taking away of your own control of the situation. But as women, so this is, I was thinking about the parallels of why sexual assault is bad for men, why it's bad for women.
Mhm.
And one of the things I was thinking about was that, sex for women has been taught as this, you're being deflowered. You are, this is supposed to be a special experience and the man is going to be pleased. And I don't know about you, but my experience learning about sex never talked about my own pleasure.
Yeah.
It talked more about male pleasure than female pleasure, but
Oh.
pleasure wasn't even really a whole lot of the conversation. But I definitely had no concept that, oh, I should be enjoying myself. And so you
Hmm.
have this deflowering concept and you have this pleasuring the man concept. And then rape really feeds this narrative of it's just what just they as in a man wants to do to you.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point to bring up because we are taught, like, whether it's we're directly taught it from, the people around you, or you're just taught it from society. Like,
Hmm.
women specifically, and at such a young age, we're taught that, oh, you just have to, like, make the guy happy.
Hmm.
Oh, like, you're 15 and you don't want to give that blowjob, but he wants it.
Right.
So you better give it to him or he's not going to like you anymore. And it's this idea that we already don't have a say on what sexual activity we do.
Hmm.
And you feel that, like, especially growing up, especially as a teenager, when you're trying to figure out the whole, sex thing, everything's new, everything is scary. You don't understand anything. You don't really understand your body. You definitely do not understand the other person's body.
Yeah.
And you're already taught that you just have to give in to whatever it is they want. And so, if that is what you are used to, if that is like the internal dialogue that you have in your head because of what society has been saying all this time, then that is going to feed directly into this like notion of getting assaulted or getting
Mm.
raped. because you're just taught, oh, I should make them happy. So
Right.
then you like actually have an instance where like you do say no, maybe you don't say no. It doesn't matter. You did not want it at all in any way, shape, or form. And you maybe just like let it happen. And then you excuse that. You know, you can't even
Mhm.
like separate out that too because you were just told that you should just make them happy to begin
Right.
with. I don't know if that made any sense,
No,
but
no, that made total sense. And it also made me think about, for some people, the narrative, sex isn't even a conversation at all. Like, it's a thing of you shouldn't be having sex until you're married. And
yep.
so if you're in any, like, that's more like religious standpoint. So if you're in any kind of intimate situation, whether you want it or not, it becomes a confusing thing. And so that I want to get to this idea of confusion in a second. But on the other side of all this, we have this, what the environment that men have grown up in, which is men always want to have sex. Sex is the thing that men always want. It's the thing they're always thinking about, especially going through their teen years and puberty and everything. And that men should be happy with sex no matter what the context is or who it's with, because hoorah, you're having sex. And when a guy hears that their other buddy got to fuck a girl for the first time, they get to pat themselves on the back and say congratulations, no matter what the person looks like. And
Mhm.
so for women, it's not about pleasure at all. And for men, it's all about pleasure. And so if a man is put in a situation, it's impossible to see them as not having experienced being in control of the situation and calling the shots. And I'm
Yeah.
not a man, so I can't speak on that, but just thinking about, okay, why is it so bad for men?
This is like a more general statement than this just applies to like anyone ever. Kind of just on that theme of like why is it so bad too when you are in a position where you are vulnerable and someone is abusing that power,
Mm,
you are scared.
mm,
And oftentimes people freeze because they know that if they try to fight them, that person is going to hurt them.
mm,
And so then you're kind of stuck in that. It's just like fear. And then it
mm,
takes away your ability to feel safe.
mm,
And it takes away your ability to feel safe in the safe, quote unquote, safest places like your bed.
mm.
It takes away your ability to feel safe in other future sexual
Encounters.
experiences. Right now, especially women are finally learning that like masturbation is normal and good. And like as a woman, it can take away your ability to love yourself in that way.
Mm,
And so it's not just like even about that fear you're feeling in the moment that it's happening, but it's like everything that happens afterwards can
mm,
be so much worse.
mm,
Right? And I think that's like the other aspect of it, like it impacts people's mental health so drastically, like whether it's PTSD, depression, anxiety, all of the above. But it also just like consistently takes away your feeling of safety in
yes.
like every scenario.
And I think that that goes back to the sex is supposed to be the most intimate thing. And I'm not saying that, like, oh, every sexual encounter you have needs to be very emotional and spiritual, whatever. I'm just saying that on a basic human level, having sex with somebody is the most intimate physical thing you can do. And so
Mhm.
when that is supposed to be in a safe place, and then all of a sudden it's brought into a space of fear and coercion and power, and or being powerless, then it takes away the core definition of what sex is supposed to be. And it's confusing. We've talked about this idea of what it's supposed to be like, and questioning, your decision making during, and like, why aren't they listening to my no, or why aren't they noticing that I'm just laying here? And at a basic level, it becomes a confusing narrative for your brain to comprehend and understand.
I think it is so powerful though that your body understands that something traumatic just happened. Like I was kind of talking about before, and for so many people after they have been assaulted, their brain can't comprehend what happened, but their body has, which is
Mm,
why people feel like super anxious or just like sick to their stomach, or they just know something is not right. I think that's really incredibly powerful from a body standpoint, that like our
Yeah.
bodies can recognize that before our brains do, and that our bodies then help us
Help protect us.
process and comprehend that a traumatic event has just occurred. I think that's like super amazing. Obviously, it fucking sucks. And like we do talk about how like trauma is held in our bodies so deeply. But I also think that like it is a way that protects us. And it's a way that so many people have been able to recognize what it is they went through and then be able to like start that healing process as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we're kind of just like a little recap, and then I have some psychology sides of things.
Hey, look
Um,
at you getting all smart on us.
that's me. Yeah, me, the Googler, the professional Googler. But yeah, so the recap, sexual assault is bad for a multitude of reasons. It's really hard to explain and understand, but at its core, it turns a pleasurable, intimate thing into a torturous one. It removes your autonomy and your ability to make a decision about what your body is doing and who comes near it. It violates a personal boundary. It's confusing because we weren't taught about what sexual assault is, and so of course we're not going to recognize it all the time when it's happening to us.
At the end of the day, nobody has the right to tell you what to do with your body and with sex, and you don't owe it to anybody. And when that is taken away and that decision making process is taken away, it feels so fucking degrading. It feels so degrading. Like, no matter who you are, it doesn't matter. That is like one of the most painful parts of the whole thing. But I do also want to say that, like, one, I commend your friend on being curious.
Oh
I
yeah.
don't think enough people are curious, and I think that's why a lot of survivors aren't cared for, aren't supported, or believed. It's because a lot of people, including many, many, many women, have this notion of, oh, well, sexual assault isn't that bad. So, like, I'm not going to support her. I'm not going to believe her. I'm not going to support him. I'm not going to believe him. And
Mm-hmm.
so, if you're just a curious person and if you just ask the right questions in the right way, we can start breaking down these barriers. And I think more people need to be doing that instead of being upfront judgmental and just saying, no, like they're full of shit, or no, like it's not that bad. We
Mm-hmm.
need to stop those narratives and just be more curious.
And be open to answering the questions. Or even,
Mhm.
I think that if you're a survivor of sexual assault and you have a new partner, I think explaining to them, you don't even have to go through details of what you went through, but explaining why it hurts could help them to know how to avoid that when having sex with you. Like, okay, they felt violated in that moment, so I need to make sure that they feel extra comfortable with me. They felt like they weren't in control, so maybe I need to ask them if they want to be the one holding the reins during sex and like if they want to be on top or whatever. So the why can also be a conversation that can help facilitate your relationships. But okay, two things. Well, a few things. So because I'm a professional Googler, I looked up just kind of what happens in the brain after sexual assault. As we know, people who experience sexual assault are very likely to end up with PTSD, depression, anxiety, dissociation, basically just any sort of bad side effect that you could, mental health side effect that you could have, it's possible, or you're more likely to get it after being sexually assaulted. But I was wondering why. Like, what? I don't understand why. So, very briefly, from my not professional self, this is what I found. The first thing is that your brain, after being sexually assaulted, it starts to go into overdrive. And so, the fear center of your brain, which is called the amygdala, becomes hyperactive and it starts constantly scanning for threats. You know, it's experienced a threat. And so now it's like, oh shit, we definitely want to make sure that doesn't happen again. So if the fear center is constantly looking around, then in theory you'll be safer, right? But if your brain is always looking for threats, even in quote unquote safe environments, this is just going to lead to you being hypervigilant and then ultimately very anxious. So that's one of the first things that happens. And then the next thing is that you have your memory center. So this is your hippocampus. And because you've experienced this sort of like lightning in your memory center, which is trauma, it can disrupt how memories are stored, which is why people experience flashbacks, fragmented memories, difficulty recalling details. And so that's that sort of thing where when victims are recalling a story or recalling what happened to them, they might do it in fragmented ways. They might not remember everything right in the moment when they're reporting it to police, but then they'll remember, 2 months down the line, or they'll remember when they're having a consensual sexual encounter with somebody, and all of a sudden it reminds them and it flashes them back to that moment of them being assaulted. So trauma disrupts that hippocampus, that memory center. And then you get stuck in this cycle of stress. So, okay, here we go. Trying to pronounce this. The hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. So this is something that we talked briefly about in our episode with Jess Michaels. Essentially, that big long thing that I just said, it releases a flood of cortisol, which is your stress hormone. And over time, the system can become dysregulated, which will lead to chronic stress. And chronic stress can lead to like serious fatigue, it can change your emotional state. And so because you're hyperactive, your adrenals are being overloaded and cortisol is all fucked up, and therefore you don't have this sense of safety where like your adrenals are only supposed to act in certain scenarios, and all of a sudden it's acting all the time. Finally, though, with all these technical things, the good news is which as survivors I don't think we get a lot of good news, but your brain is capable of healing, and that's really freaking awesome. And you can rewire your brain thanks to hashtag neuroplasticity. And so things like EMDR or trauma-informed counseling, having safe experiences, all of this stuff can help change the way that you go about life. And just because you're sexually assaulted and your adrenals are fucked and your hippocampus isn't working the way it did originally and all of this stuff, it doesn't mean it can't go back to a place of safety. That's not to say that it's going to be gone like forever, but it is to say that our brains are amazing. And the same way that they protected us during those traumatic times and are trying to protect us after those traumatic times, your brain also wants to heal. So thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
At the end of the day, like looking back at my healing journey and your healing journey, 3 years ago, around this exact time, I was like crying every 20 minutes. And now I don't do that.
That's true.
And it sounds so stupid, but it does show, I look back over the last 3 years and where I've been at this time every, year, and you can see how you healed. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like 3 years ago, I was dysfunctional. And now I'm sitting here having these conversations, not only like personal conversations about my personal experiences, but just sexual assault as a whole and the impacts of it. And I'm not crying, and it doesn't upset me. It doesn't activate my brain in all these crazy ways like we were
Right.
talking about how it used to. And so I think that like if you're someone listening and you're in it right now, like you are fucking in it, like you're like everything is activating all these like terrible things in your brain all the time, and you think it's never going to stop. I always hate saying this because it's like I promise it's going to get better, but like it will, but you do have to allow yourself to heal. And I think that is one of the biggest steps you can take, and it's really scary to sit there and actually take the time to like work with a therapist and be like, yes, I'm willing to heal, I'm willing to work on this, because it is a painful process and there are so many ups and downs, and it just really comes and goes in waves. And obviously like I still have my bad days and weeks, and so does Shannon, but it's one of those things where as long as you gotta just like you gotta sit in it a little bit.
You have to give yourself the tools to heal as well. So time is a tool that you don't have control over, but getting a good support system is a tool that's more in your control, or going to therapy, or letting your professors know, or your, sexual assault center at school who can offer you support. Like those, you have to be willing to advocate for yourself and give yourself the correct tools to be on that healing journey. It's not just going to like happen.
And honestly, like there are days where you feel like you can't advocate for yourself, and we've all been there. And that's when having that support system that can advocate for you on behalf of you, not all the time, but on the days you can't do it, is just so vital and so important.
Absolutely. Yeah, sexual assault fucking sucks. And it's something that sucks and is hard to explain. It's hard to comprehend, which is why it's a complicated thing to break down. And I think that there are probably plenty of other reasons too of why sexual assault is so bad, why it hurts, why it's so traumatic. But when you just Google why is sexual assault so bad, which weird thing to Google, but I did look it up to see if it had any answers. There's not a lot that comes up. Like it's essentially sexual assault resources and websites, and they talk about how you will get PTSD, but they don't talk about, why it hurts.
I think that like educating yourself too on the whys of these things, like even when you're going through the thick of it, can be really helpful because it's honestly kind of just nicely validating sometimes. Like, oh, like all this crazy shit that's going on in my brain and is making me feel these ways, and like my body's doing weird things. Like, there's like a scientific explanation for why it is happening. It is not just like this random thing that's going on in your head.
Yeah, because I'm thinking about specific times where I remember just absolutely breaking down. And I remember my range of emotions was much greater after my assault than it was before. Like I never really cried in front of my mother before being assaulted. I wasn't an angry person. Like I had experienced anger, but it was very rare. And I felt after my assault a very dramatic shift where I was crying a lot. I felt bland a lot of the time. I was very angry a lot of the time, an anger that I hadn't experienced before. And so, like you were saying, it's this thing of, okay, I feel like my body's changed. I don't understand why. And so, this is just a reminder that these are some of the reasons why it was so bad. And it's okay that you're hurting right now because your brain is like, bitch, what the fuck was that? I didn't like that. And it's trying to sort out ways to heal.
Amen, sister friend.
On that note, thank you so much for listening. We love you guys so much. We'll catch you on the flip side.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers. Bye.